She stood 6 feet tall in an industry that preferred women small and controllable. The platinum blonde Amazonian goddess who commanded the silver screen in the 1980s with a presence that could not be ignored. Brigitte Nielsen, statuesque, striking, seemingly invincible in her towering height and unforgettable beauty. The cameras loved her. Directors carved out roles to showcase her singular presence. Her marriage to one of Hollywood's biggest action stars cemented her place in entertainment royalty. But what the lights didn't capture was the silent struggle beneath the glamour. The young Danish girl who left home with nothing but determination, who fought to be taken seriously in a business that often reduced her to her physical appearance. The woman who would face addiction in full view of a merciless public. The mother who longed for a daughter, even as time and biology seemed to conspire against her. The spotlight is a curious thing. It illuminates everything except what truly matters. And for Nielsen, what mattered most was never fully visible until the cameras stopped rolling. In the bright glare of fame, she became an icon of 1980s excess and strength. In the quiet that followed, she became something far more profound, a survivor whose journey reveals the true measure of resilience. Before we begin, we'd love to hear from you. On a scale of 1 to 10, how would you rate Brigitte Nielsen's impact on film and culture? Your opinion truly matters. The story begins in Copenhagen, Denmark on July 15, 1963, when Brigitte Nielsen entered the world with a genetic gift that would both define and complicate her life. Extraordinary height. Even as a child, she towered over her classmates, standing out in a culture that values conformity. The daughter of a librarian and an engineer, young Brigitte grew up in a home where discipline was paramount and expectations were high. "I was always the tallest," she would later recall in interviews. "At school, they would put me in the back row for photographs. I would slouch to try to fit in." But fitting in was never in her destiny. Her childhood home was orderly, structured, a place where emotions were kept in check and ambitions were encouraged, but within clearly defined boundaries. Her father's engineer mind valued precision, plans, solutions. Her mother's librarian soul treasured knowledge and quiet contemplation. And somewhere between these influences, young Brigitte developed a yearning for something explosive, expressive, larger than the contained life that seemed mapped out for her. The family apartment wasn't large by American standards, but it was a respectable middle-class home. Young Brigitte would stand at the windows, looking out at the gray Copenhagen skies, dreaming of brighter lights, bigger cities, a world where her height wouldn't be an awkwardness to overcome, but an asset to celebrate. School wasn't a sanctuary. Children can be cruel to anyone who stands out, and Brigitte stood out in the most literal sense. "Kids called me a giraffe," she once shared. "I was self-conscious and withdrawn." But beneath the quiet exterior, a steely determination was forming, a resolve to turn what made her different into what would make her special. By 16, the constrictive atmosphere of home and the predictable path laid before her became unbearable. The world beyond Denmark beckoned, a world where perhaps her unconventional beauty might find appreciation. With little more than courage and instinct, she left school and home, making her way to Paris and then Italy. Her parents weren't supportive of this decision. They had envisioned a conventional life for their daughter, education, a professional career, stability. Instead, she chose uncertainty, the precarious world of modeling, a realm where beauty was currency, but where the exchange rate could change overnight. In Milan, her striking Nordic looks and imposing height caught the attention of fashion photographers. She wasn't the typical model, not delicate or conventionally pretty by the standards of the time. But there was something arresting about her presence, something that commanded attention. Photographers found that they couldn't look away, and neither could anyone else. The camera revealed what Brigitte herself was only beginning to understand, that what had made her an outsider in Copenhagen made her extraordinary in the international modeling scene. The very features that had brought childhood taunts now brought professional opportunities. The girl who had slouched to fit in now stood tall, shoulders back, owning her full 6'1" height. Fashion spreads led to magazine covers. Her work grew more prestigious, her name more recognized. But even as her modeling career flourished, Brigitte felt the pull of something more. Modeling captured her exterior, but it didn't capture her voice, her thoughts, her essence. She yearned to express more, to be more than a silent image on glossy paper. The early 1980s found her in a transitional space, successful enough to have financial independence but restless for new challenges. Her ambition wasn't satisfied by runway success alone. When casting directors started to take notice of the striking blonde model who towered over her peers, Brigitte sensed a new path opening before her. The silver screen offered what magazine pages could not: movement, voice, character, story. And then came the audition that would alter the trajectory of her life. It was 1984, and producer Dino De Laurentiis was casting for a new fantasy epic called Red Sonja, based on a character from the world of Conan the Barbarian. The role required someone with not just beauty, but a physical presence that could command attention. Someone who could believably wield a sword and lead armies. When Brigitte walked into the audition room, something clicked. De Laurentiis reportedly said upon meeting her, "We've found our Sonja." It wasn't just her height or her striking features. It was an innate quality she possessed, a certain fearlessness combined with vulnerability that made her perfect for the warrior queen role. Without any formal acting training, Brigitte Nielsen was cast in the title role of a major Hollywood production. The leap from modeling to acting is rarely smooth, and Brigitte's transition came with significant challenges. Acting required skills beyond projecting an image. It demanded emotional access, technical understanding, the ability to take direction and work collaboratively. She would later admit that she was utterly unprepared for what filming entailed. "I had no idea what I was doing," she confessed years later. "I was thrown into the deep end." The production was grueling. Physical stunts, long shooting days, the pressure of carrying a film on inexperienced shoulders. Critics would later be unkind about her performance, but what they didn't see was the determination behind it, the sheer will it took for a novice to complete such a demanding role. Red Sonja wasn't a commercial or critical success, but it accomplished something crucial for Brigitte. It introduced her to Hollywood and to Sylvester Stallone, who saw the film and was immediately struck by her screen presence. The connection would change everything. What people often forget about Brigitte Nielsen is that her rise wasn't gradual, it was meteoric. Within the span of 2 years, she went from being an unknown model to starring in multiple Hollywood films opposite some of the biggest names in the industry. The speed of her ascent left little time for adjustment, for learning the unwritten rules of Hollywood, for building a support system in a foreign country. When Sylvester Stallone cast her in Rocky IV as Ludmilla, the intimidating Soviet wife of boxer Ivan Drago, played by Dolph Lundgren, Nielsen found herself in one of the biggest film franchises of the era. The role wasn't large, but it was impactful. Her icy blonde presence added to the film's Cold War tension and cemented her image as a statuesque, somewhat forbidding beauty in the public imagination. On set, the chemistry between Stallone and Nielsen was immediate and powerful. By the time filming wrapped, they were involved romantically, despite Stallone being married. The tabloids exploded with the story. Overnight, Brigitte Nielsen became not just an actress, but a celebrity. Fodder for gossip columns, subject of public fascination, half of a Hollywood power couple that embodied the excess and glamour of the mid-1980s. The relationship moved with the same breathtaking speed as everything else in Brigitte's life during this period. Stallone divorced his wife, and within months, he and Nielsen were married in a ceremony that drew international media attention. She was 22, he was 39. Their union became one of the most photographed, discussed, and scrutinized relationships in Hollywood. The spotlight intensified. Every appearance was documented, every outfit analyzed, every word quoted and often misquoted. For a young woman still finding her footing in a new country and a new industry, the attention was overwhelming. But Nielsen projected confidence, even defiance. If the public wanted to watch, she would give them something to see. Her next film was Cobra, again starring alongside her new husband. The action thriller cast her as a witness to a murder who becomes a target herself. Once more, The role played on her physical presence rather than demanding significant acting range. But it kept her name in lights, her face on posters, her place in Hollywood seemingly secure. But here's where it gets complicated. The very relationship that had accelerated her rise to fame was beginning to overshadow her individual identity. In the press, she wasn't Brigitte Nielsen actress. She was Brigitte Nielsen, Stallone's wife. Her career became inextricably linked to his, her own ambitions secondary in the public narrative. When she was cast in Beverly Hills Cop 2 as a jewel thief and criminal mastermind opposite Eddie Murphy, it should have been a turning point, a major role in a major franchise that had nothing to do with her famous husband. The film was a commercial success, and Nielsen's performance showed glimpses of the range she possessed beyond the Ice Queen typecasting. But behind the scenes, her marriage was crumbling as quickly as it had formed. The intense passion that had characterized their beginning couldn't sustain itself under the pressure of public scrutiny and two strong, ambitious personalities. After just 19 months of marriage, Nielsen and Stallone divorced in July 1987. The split was bitter and public. Stallone was the established star with industry power. Nielsen was still viewed as the newcomer, the model-turned-actress whose legitimacy was questioned. In the court of public opinion, she was often cast as the villain, the foreign beauty who had broken up a marriage for ambition's sake. It was a simplistic narrative that ignored the complexity of real relationships, but it stuck. And then came the professional consequences. Hollywood can be unforgiving to women who are seen as difficult or demanding, and the fallout from her high-profile divorce affected Brigitte's career trajectory. The roles that had come so quickly during her marriage to Stallone became scarcer. The A-list projects disappeared. The phone stopped ringing as often. What really happened was this. A young woman who had experienced a lightning-fast rise to fame found herself facing an equally rapid fall. The industry that had embraced her began to close its doors. The press that had celebrated her began to mock her. And Brigitte Nielsen, not yet 25 years old, had to face the harsh reality that in Hollywood, second acts don't come easily, especially for women. The late 1980s and early 1990s saw her taking roles in smaller films, often European productions that didn't receive wide distribution in America. She worked steadily, but without the spotlight that had once followed her every move. There were bright moments, a music career in Europe that produced dance hits, modeling work that continued to value her unique look, television appearances that kept her name recognizable. But the trajectory was undeniably downward from the heights of Rocky IV and Beverly Hills Cop 2. And in this period of professional uncertainty, Nielsen's personal life was equally tumultuous. She had been married briefly before Stallone, and after their divorce, she would marry and divorce twice more in quick succession. Relationships flared intensely and burned out quickly. There were public romances with football player Mark Gastineau and with Flavor Flav of Public Enemy, relationships that seemed designed to keep her in the tabloids even as her film career waned. Throughout these years, she was also a mother. Her first son, Julian, had been born in 1984 when she was just 20 years old, from her first marriage to Danish musician Kasper Winding. After the divorce from Stallone, she had another son, Killian, with ex-fiancé Mark Gastineau in 1989. During her marriage to photographer Sebastian Copeland, from 1990 to 1992, she was a stepmother to his child, and her fourth marriage to Raoul Meyer in 1993 brought two more sons, Douglas and Raoul Jr. Motherhood was a role that received less public attention than her romantic entanglements, but it was one she valued deeply. However, parenting while navigating a tumultuous career and personal life proved challenging. There were periods when her children lived with their fathers or with Nielsen's mother in Denmark while she struggled to rebuild her career and her life, and struggle she did. The 1990s were not kind to Brigitte Nielsen. As roles became scarcer and less prestigious, financial problems mounted. The lifestyle she had grown accustomed to during her peak fame became unsustainable, and like many before her who have experienced the dizzying heights of fame followed by rejection, Nielsen turned to alcohol for comfort. What began as social drinking evolved into dependency. Alcohol became a way to numb the pain of career disappointment, to quiet the voices of critics, to temporarily escape the reality of how far and how quickly she had fallen from Hollywood's graces. "I was drinking myself to death," she would later admit with candid honesty. The addiction grew worse over the years, consuming more and more of her life, her resources, her health. There were attempts at sobriety, periods of improvement followed by relapses. The public Nielsen, still beautiful, still statuesque, was maintaining an increasingly fragile facade while her private reality crumbled. By the early 2000s, Nielsen's alcoholism had reached a crisis point. Her fourth marriage had ended. Her career consisted mainly of appearances in reality shows and tabloids rather than films, and her financial situation was dire. In interviews from this period, she speaks of drinking 2 bottles of vodka a day, of blackouts, of health scares that should have been wake-up calls but weren't. The bottom, when it came, was devastatingly public. In 2007, photographs surfaced of Nielsen in a Los Angeles park, disheveled, drinking directly from a vodka bottle, clearly intoxicated in the middle of the day. The images were published worldwide. The woman who had once epitomized glamour was now the subject of pitying headlines about addiction and fallen stars. For many celebrities, such public humiliation would be the final chapter of their story. But what makes Brigitte Nielsen's journey remarkable is what happened next. After those photos circulated, Nielsen made the decision to enter rehabilitation. It wasn't her first attempt at sobriety, but it was the one that finally took hold. With the support of her fifth husband, Italian bartender Mattia Desi, whom she had married in 2006, she committed to the arduous process of recovery. "Getting sober was the hardest thing I've ever done," she has said. "Harder than leaving home at 16, harder than divorce, harder than anything." The process wasn't quick or easy. There were setbacks, moments of weakness, the persistent temptation to return to the numbing comfort of alcohol. But day by day, Nielsen rebuilt her life from its foundation. Sobriety brought clarity, and with it came a willingness to look honestly at her past. Nielsen began to speak openly about her struggles in interviews and reality shows. She appeared on Celebrity Rehab with Dr. Drew, not as a patient, but as a mentor to others fighting addiction. She wrote a candid autobiography, You Only Get One Life, published in 2011, in which she confronted her mistakes and missteps with refreshing honesty, and gradually, an unexpected third act began to take shape. Nielsen's career found new life in reality television. Shows like The Surreal Life, Strange Love, and various European versions of Celebrity Big Brother and Jungle Camp offered a platform where her larger-than-life personality could shine. These weren't prestige dramas or big-budget films, but they reconnected her with audiences and provided financial stability after years of uncertainty. What's most interesting about this phase of Nielsen's career is how it revealed a side of her that her earlier fame had obscured: her self-awareness, her humor, her willingness to be vulnerable. The woman who had once seemed remote and intimidating on screen now showed herself to be earthy, funny, capable of laughing at herself and her past excesses. Audiences responded to this authenticity, this glimpse of the real person behind the iconic image. In her personal life, too, Nielsen found a stability that had eluded her during her years of peak fame. Her marriage to Desi, unlike her previous unions, endured. Despite their significant age difference, she is 15 years his senior. The relationship proved supportive and grounding. In interviews, Nielsen speaks of him with a calm affection very different from the dramatic passions of her earlier relationships. There was, however, one dream that continued to elude her: the daughter she had always longed for. Nielsen had 4 sons whom she loved deeply, but she had always hoped for a daughter as well. As she entered her 40s, then her 50s, biological reality seemed to make this dream increasingly remote. But Nielsen wasn't ready to give up. In her mid-40s, she began researching fertility options, aware that the odds were against her but determined to try. For over a decade, she underwent treatments, faced disappointments, saved money for expensive procedures with no guarantee of success. It was a private struggle until she chose to share it, hoping her experience might help other women facing similar challenges. And then, in 2018, at the age of 54, Brigitte Nielsen announced her pregnancy. The news was met with surprise, some criticism, and many questions about the ethics and possibilities of later-in-life motherhood. Nielsen weathered the commentary with the resilience she had developed through decades in the public eye. On June 22, 2018, she gave birth to a daughter, Frida. "It's the happiest time in my life," she told reporters. "I've been waiting for this for so long." The birth represented more than just the arrival of a long-desired daughter. It symbolized Nielsen's reclaimed agency over her own narrative, her refusal to let age or convention dictate her choices. The same year brought another unexpected turn in her career journey. Nielsen reprised her role as Ludmilla Drago in Creed II, the continuation of the Rocky saga that had played such a pivotal role in her early fame. It was a full-circle moment that connected her present to her past, while demonstrating how much had changed, both in her life and in how Hollywood portrays women, particularly older women. In Creed II, Nielsen's character isn't simply the cold, beautiful appendage to a male character that she had been in Rocky IV. She's a complex woman with her own history of hardship and resilience. The role allowed her to showcase the depth and nuance she had always been capable of, but rarely given the opportunity to display. Today, at 61, Brigitte Nielsen lives a life that would have been difficult to imagine during either the dizzying heights of her early fame or the painful naders that followed. She splits her time between the United States and Italy, balancing work commitments with family life. Her social media shows a woman comfortable in her own skin, neither hiding from her age nor obsessively fighting it. Elegant, still striking, but without the brittle perfection that characterized her modeling years. Motherhood to a young child in her 60s has been both challenging and rejuvenating. In interviews, she speaks of having more patience, more wisdom to offer now than she did as a young mother. She acknowledges the unconventional nature of her family, but celebrates the joy it brings her. "I know some people think I'm too old," she has said, "but I'm healthier and more engaged now than I was in my 20s. Her career continues, though at a pace and scale of her choosing, rather than the relentless chase of her early Hollywood days. She takes acting roles that interest her, appears in reality programs when they appeal to her sense of adventure or humor, and has developed a presence as a speaker who shares her experiences with addiction and recovery to help others. Financially, she has achieved stability after the turbulent years of alcoholism and career decline. While not commanding the enormous paychecks of her 1980s heyday, her diverse career across European and American entertainment has built a comfortable nest egg. Forbes estimates her net worth at approximately $600,000, modest by Hollywood standards, but a testament to her resilience and work ethic. What's perhaps most striking about Nielsen today is her apparent peace with her own story. In interviews, she reflects on her past without bitterness, acknowledging mistakes without dwelling on them. "I've lived many lives," she once said, "some beautiful, some painful, all mine." There's a wisdom in her words that comes only from having survived both adulation and rejection, from having experienced both extraordinary privilege and humbling hardship. The journey from Copenhagen to Hollywood, from addiction to recovery, from young motherhood to maternal joy in her 50s, it's a narrative arc more compelling than many of the films she starred in. And throughout it all, the constant has been her refusal to disappear, to shrink herself, to become less than who she is. In an industry notoriously unkind to women as they age, Nielsen has remained visible, vital, and unapologetically herself. The 6'1" frame that once made her an outsider in Danish schoolyards still sets her apart, but now it symbolizes her steadfast refusal to diminish herself to fit others' expectations. The legacy of Brigitte Nielsen isn't found in box office tallies or award nominations. It's in the path she carved as a European model who became a Hollywood star through sheer force of will. It's in her openness about addiction and recovery, showing others that rock bottom doesn't have to be the end of the story. It's in her redefinition of what motherhood can look like, challenging assumptions about age and fertility. And perhaps most importantly, it's in her embodiment of resilience, the quality that has allowed her to weather public scrutiny, professional rejection, personal struggles, and still emerge not just surviving, but thriving. Her story reminds us that life is rarely a straight line to success, but rather a series of rises and falls, triumphs and setbacks. That fame can be both blessing and curse. That it's never too late to rewrite your narrative, to find new joy, to become more authentically yourself. In the entertainment industry's constellation of stars, Brigitte Nielsen may not shine as brightly as she once did in those electric 1980s moments, but her light has proven more enduring than many who burned brighter for a time and then faded entirely. There is something to be said for persistence, for the quiet dignity of continuing on one's path despite obstacles and detours. What does Brigitte Nielsen mean to you? Share your memories below. If this story moved you, like, share, and subscribe, then watch the next video on your screen.